Okito.
Great. So yeah, philosophy eats science for breakfast. Not in a bad way, as you'll see. Don't mean that in a bad way, not as bad as it sounds. It's a bit of a joke. So I recently read a remark which prompted this talk by an American neuroscientist called Eric Hole. I don't know exactly know how to pronounce his name actually, but uh it's not going. Oh, all right, I'll click the mouse, I guess. So he says he's talking about the problem of consciousness, which is a topic I've been obsessed with for a long time. It's really what got me into philosophy. The problem of understanding how we're making sense of the relationship between our conscious sensations, itches, pains, pangs of hunger, pangs of love, making sense of those and the electrochemical activity in greyish flesh that is the brain. Um, I'm obsessed with that. Hole says ultimately it'll be scientists who make progress on consciousness, not philosophers. And he goes on to stress the importance of having a scientifically validated theory of consciousness, as he puts it. Then similar sentiments expressed by another guy I read, this AI researcher, this guy Casper Willstrup, who's like a big shot, founder of an AI-driven drugs design company. So they use AI to design new molecules, quite cool. So he says, also talking about consciousness, in the lab, we essentially create these philosophical zombies, also known as AIs. We tinker with configurations of matter, interaction points, and the like, and theories like IIT and ORC-OR. IIT is integrated information theory. Eventually, we'll pinpoint what sets a conscious being apart from a non-conscious one. We'll figure out the specific arrangements that allow unified consciousness to emerge from the proto-conscious properties of individual parts. Then he goes on, that's right. This bit I find condescending. With AI, the philosophy of mind has graduated to an experimental science. No more guesswork. These are my emphases, by the way. The italics are mine. Just build, test, and learn. We're not just tossing around ideas like philosophers do. We can actually set up tests and experiments to pinpoint the configurations that allow consciousness to form from its proto-conscious elements. Philosophy of mind has graduated. Thanks to AI, it's now a natural science. So that's this guy, Willstrup. And I mean, relatedly, a friend of mine who's a very good philosopher of mind was recently giving a talk in New York at NYU. So we're talking about the home of Thomas Nagel and David Chalmers, bats and zombies. And after the talk, first objection, where's the science? Where's the science? Uh, Philip Kitcher has a recent book with a paradoxical title, What's the Use of Philosophy? A philosophical book written by a philosopher with the question, what is the use of philosophy? And he says, according to him, philosophers. So it's not just scientists, philosophers who say this stuff. Philosophers obsess over the minutiae of problems that are only recognized as worth laboring over by a handful of specialists who count it as their cherished domain of expertise. But if even professional philosophers from neighboring areas um, have a hard time seeing the point of the debates that preoccupy their close colleagues, and it becomes hard to conceive of plausible scenarios in which philosophical research will produce anything of value for science or society. Notice the standard, anything of value for science or society. His solution, here's his solution. Kitcher, academic philosophy should reform and recalibrate itself to the values and needs of science and society. That's his book. This is an editorial paraphrase of his book, in fact. So I think, not to put too fine a point on it, that these statements, these sentiments are completely misguided, or rather, sorry, significantly unguided, you might say. But I recognize that the sentiment they express is widespread at the moment. It's quite fashionable to say philosophy is useless, or that science is what solves all questions. But I would try to back up my reaction against this sort of thing in what follows by saying a bit about how I think the relationship between philosophy and science might be. Um, I'm a philosopher of mind and cognitive science, but I've got broad interest in philosophy I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the philosophy of science or the philosophy of philosophy, but I have a view. I'll tell you what I think. So that will involve making some speculations and assertions about philosophy, its relation to science, and the nature of philosophy itself, what it is to do philosophy. But before I get going, I want to give you a little challenge or a kind of task test you can think about in the background during the talk. And then you can tell me your answers at the end. This is something I was thinking about when Boren asked me to give this talk, been thinking about it ever since. Like, what questions has science really answered? So science is empirical, right? If it's anything, that's what people say. It's connected to observation and experiment. Uh, it's tested, its validity is tested by whether it squares with our experience of the world and observations we make, results and predictions. If a scientific theory doesn't give good results or it's unsuccessful, we get rid of it. Like we got rid of Aristotle's theory that big things fall faster than small things, right? Okay. But what about science as a whole project? How successful has it been? Uh, very successful practically. It's given us a lot of gadgets, medicines, life extending things. I mean, however, whatever the costs are of living longer and all these gadgets, that's a good thing overall. But what theoretical questions has science really answered? This might seem like a ridiculous question, but seriously, has any definitive progress been made, for example, on the question of what the nature of perception is? Since Aristotle's day, Aristotle said, in vision, you receive the form of a thing without the matter. 2 millennia of science and physics since, we know a lot more about the visual system, about vision. But in naive realists who say we directly perceive the world, and indirect realists who say, no, no, you're really seeing your brain in some sense or your mind, their debate is as fierce as ever. The main issues seem unresolved. What about the mind-body problem? Plato was a dualist. Aristotle was more of a materialist. Again, we've done 2 millennia and a lot of neuroscience since. We know all about the brain. There are dualists and materialists now. Those empirical results don't seem to have affected the big question at all, as far as I can see. What about the question whether the universe has a beginning or has a creator? Plato has a designer and creator, God. Aristotle's universe is eternal and uncreated, kind of clockwork system. Okay, God's there, kind of powering it. But we're having the same debates today. People are talking about fine-tuning, whether that's evidence for the existence of God. Despite the advances of cosmology and physics. So if science is judged by its results, on its own, by its own standards on these big questions, I would put it to you that it's failed, hasn't really done anything. Our picture of physics is totally different from the 17th century mechanical picture. Now we talk about fields, quantum physics, but we're debating as vigorously and in practically identical terms things like whether colors are in the head or in the world. Now, you might say these aren't scientific questions, so who cares, or what's the big deal, or so much the worse for these questions. But then look at what Hurl just said at the top. He said, it'll be science that sorts out the problem of consciousness, not philosophy. So then I think we need to get clearer on what the proper domains of science and of philosophy are. In response to this, people saying that science is going to solve all the problems, but as far as I can see, it hasn't solved any of them, any of these issues, hasn't arguably made any progress on them at all. So we need to get clearer on the proper domains of science and of philosophy, say something about their relationship, and that's what I'm going to try and do in what follows. I mean, I doubt anything I say, even if it's right, will be new, but for what it's worth, these are my thoughts. Okay, so that's by way of introduction. The slides are just going to be mainly quotes and pictures, so the content's kind of just coming out of my mouth. Right, so philosophers doing this topic often start from like what's philosophy, what's science, how do they relate? They often start with this famous quote by Wilfrid Sellers. I'm going to start from it as well. You guys are nodding already. You know the one. But I like the quote, but I'm going to go and criticize a few other things Sellers says because they don't seem to me to fit very well with the quote. So the famous Sellers line is this: the aim of philosophy, abstractly formulated, is to understand how things, in the broadest possible sense of the term. Can I move that? Actually, this is probably bothering you guys. There we go. How things, in the broadest possible sense of the term, hang together in the broadest possible sense of the term. Lovely. That seems to me on the right track in major respects. I also agree with him when he says a bit later in the same article, philosophy in an important sense has no special subject matter which stands to it as other subject matters stand to other special disciplines. So philosophy has a generality, right, that distinguishes it from other human investigations. In some sense, philosophy takes an overview of human knowledge. So Sellers compares it to an eye in this way. He says, philosophy has the task of seeing all things together. It is therefore the eye on the whole which distinguishes the philosophical enterprise, the eye on the whole. Hence, for Sellers, so here he says, so if you think about scientists in their disciplines, to the extent that a specialist, for example, a physicist, is more concerned to reflect on how his work as a specialist joins up with other intellectual pursuits, he's more than in asking and answering questions within his speciality, he is said properly to be philosophically minded. So if you're a scientist who thinks about how physics knits up with biology and chemistry and so on, if you have an eye on the whole, then you're kind of more philosophical. If you stick to your physics or you stick to your biology, then you're more scientific. That seems right as well. So philosophy is something to do with the eye on the whole. So philosophy doesn't bracket anything. It doesn't bracket anything. It considers everything. So think about physics. Physicists must talk about observations and measurements, for example, which are psychological events, but they have to talk about them in unreduced terms, take them as basic. They don't say anything further about them. They don't analyze them in any way. Psychology doesn't take physics into account. Chemistry generally ignores psychology, generally ignores biology, and so on. Philosophy, though, takes them all into account uniquely, so it's comprehensive in that way. But it can't just be an eye. It can't be just an eye, which surveys things built by other people, by non-philosophers. Because I can't see how that role meshes with what Sellers says at the top. This first quote, to understand the universe and how everything in it hangs together, to get at the fundamentals. That's not just about an eye, seeing what other people have built. Now, Barry Stroud has got this nice book, The Quest for Reality, which is about metaphysics of color. He seems to agree with me about this. He says, what I'm calling the quest for reality has been part of Western philosophy since before Socrates was born. It is perhaps even definitive of philosophy. It is meant to be a quest whose goal is the nature of reality, what the world is like or how things really are. So how that goal is different from what sciences are aiming at is a good question to come back to. But clearly for this reality quest, philosophy needs to do more than survey other fields. It's not enough to say with Sellers again that what's characteristic of philosophy is not a special subject matter, but the aim of knowing one's way around with respect to the subject matter of all the special disciplines. That's not enough. That makes philosophy too abstract, too detached from the investigative endeavors, which takes no overview, and rather passive, just a recipient of ideas made elsewhere, not a provider of ideas. Philosophy in that guise cannot conduct a quest for reality. I think, in fact, if we accept this, that it's just a passive recipient or kind of eye for what's made in other fields, we're well on the way to this fashionable view that many people, including many philosophers, have, kind of paradoxical view, I think, that philosophy is essentially useless. I don't think a philosopher can really believe that. I mean, Aristotle says of Heraclitus, Heraclitus claims that, he's you can't step in the same river twice guy because the river's not the same and neither are you. Like nothing stays still, not even for a second, not even for a nanosecond. So he thinks the law of non-contradiction doesn't hold. He thinks, the law of excluded middle doesn't hold. And Aristotle says, he says this, people say that he says this, but he can't believe it. He can't believe it because he couldn't even assert it if he believed it, because to assert it relies on those laws. Like Cratylus, I don't know if you've heard of Cratylus, there's a Platonic dialogue. So he was more consistent. He took Heraclitus very seriously. He refused to speak. He would just wag a finger if people spoke to him. That's the way you're going, it seems to me, if you say philosophy is useless. You're ending up in paradox. You won't be able to speak anymore. Okay. So philosophy, other people see philosophy not like so much like an eye, more like a pair of hands. Its job is to fit things together, fit everything else together from which it takes from the other sciences, especially science. So Peter Godfrey Smith calls this the integrative role of philosophy. So it's not an eye, its job is to integrate. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's good. But that might seem to suggest still that philosophy is contentless compared to the sciences. So compare that to the Sellers quote about philosophy lacking its own special subject matter. It seems to just play with things that other people have given it. But Godfrey Smith objects to this idea, or this closely related idea, that philosophy, all it really gives us is skills or techniques. It doesn't have content of its own. He says, in the US, when asked about the point of philosophy, people quite often say that what is distinctive is a set of skills, clarity, analysis, critical thinking. Philosophers, they say, do not know any special facts or theories, and have no permanent subject matter, but they have a skill set that can be usefully brought to bear on any problem. And he doesn't like this. When this is presented as a general view of the point of philosophy as an activity or profession, I'm against it. Philosophy is not an uninvited management consultant to more substantive intellectual life. Like that seems great to me, seems really right. But how can philosophy be the overseer and the integrator of what is in the sciences, not be itself contentless, which would be bad, I think, but also, as Sellers says, lack a special subject matter of its own? How can those things be true in the way that physics, chemistry, biology have their own special subject matter and fairly clearly demarcated terrains? The answer is surely that philosophy's field is everything, including the fields of all the other sciences. So it may lack a special subject matter in the sense of a specific one, but it has in a way the most special subject matter, the whole of the world, the whole of reality, fitting the whole thing together. The whole of the world is what the other disciplines study piecemeal, the physical aspect, the chemical aspect, the biological aspect. Philosophy studies those all. So it has a very special subject matter, in fact. But what kind of integration does philosophy aim to achieve or achieve in practice? Let me distinguish two ways of taking that idea. That philosophy, as part of its defining nature, integrates what comes from the other sciences or other domains. Other domains, but for us, mostly we're thinking about science today. So first, philosophy might fit together theories from other domains in the way one fits together Lego bricks. So Lego bricks don't change as you put them together. They are static, preformed. The job is put them together into a smooth whole. Don't have bits sticking out, ugly thing. Don't make it so unbalanced that it falls over. So in this metaphor, philosophy is trying to fit together the claims and theories and ideas of the other sciences into a smooth whole, make sure it's harmonious in some way, assess the extent to which the fitting together is possible, but it doesn't do anything to the materials. But second, philosophy's role might be much more active and substantive. Perhaps the scientific material which philosophy plays with and seeks to put together is not like static Lego bricks, but more like clay, which has got to be shaped and molded and transformed somewhat, made to fit together by the action of the potter and transformed in the process. So I think this idea now of scientific theories as matter for philosophy, and philosophy hence as something like form in Aristotle's sense, form for scientific ideas. This is a fruitful idea, and that's what I intend to develop below. So in the end, I want to say philosophy, more than an eye or even a pair of hands, even the shaping hands of a potter, is more like a mouth and a digestive system. Eating, digesting matter from scientific theories, and building them together into an organism, a living, harmonious, organic body of theory of the whole of reality. And just as a body needs food, philosophy needs and depends on the matter that science and empirical investigation provide it. Hence my title, Philosophy Eats Science for Breakfast. So I don't mean it in a, there is like a jokey way, but I don't mean it in a bad way. So a couple of quotations, one from Godfrey Smith and one from Stroud, Barry Stroud, seem like very fitting with what I'm saying regarding the nature of philosophy and its relation to science. Godfrey Smith says, this is a long quote, in philosophy of nature, the philosophy's attention is not on scientific work itself, but on nature, or some part of nature seen through the lens of science. The philosopher takes as their starting point the descriptions of some part of the natural world that come from science, but when working out what we've learned about this part of nature and how it relates to the rest, the philosopher need not just accept the raw science or the scientist's own simplifications of it for export. Philosophy of nature is based on science, but it is philosophically processed science. I love that, philosophically processed. So this is much more hands-on than the Salesian eye. This isn't just an eye. Philosophy processes science. And elsewhere he says philosophy has the job, or this is Godfrey Smith, of processing raw scientific work. He doesn't mean processing in the sense of understanding, or not just that. He means the philosophy somehow transforms the science that it integrates. But not just that, processing suggests refinement, taking something further along the natural trajectory of its development, taken to a higher degree or level of being. And that's important too, I think. In a way, science is incomplete without philosophy. Scientific theories find their highest mode of expression, their most significant statement, and their greatest power and scope and purpose within a philosophical framework. Below, I'll give some examples to illustrate and kind of try to back up these ideas a bit. And Stroud says, so that's Godfrey Smith. Stroud says, the philosophical quest must start somewhere. It needs a set of beliefs about what the world is like. Without some attitudes, perceptions, beliefs or theories to start with, it would have nothing to reflect on. So it relies from the outset on the results of our best efforts to find out what is so, and it begins by accepting the deliverances of the sciences and everyday experience and everything else we think we know. 2 points about this excellent passage. First, he clearly emphasizes, Stroud, that philosophy needs science. Philosophy must start from a set of beliefs about what the world is like. And the best developed set of such beliefs we have is science. Bertrand Russell says something similar. He says, philosophy without science will wither and cease to grow. And science is nourishment for philosophy. I think the dependence is even stronger than this idea of nourishment. It's not like you could keep philosophy away from science, but give it some analog of vitamin pills or like the pills astronauts take so they don't need to eat real food and keep it alive with, in isolation from science. That wouldn't work. The relationship, so philosophy, I'd say, is nothing without science, really. Philosophy and science are constitutively related. They depend on one another. So the closer analogy is matter and form, seems to me. The form of a house, say the house, is something like its blueprint, its function, its distinctive power, to be a shelter for people of timber, bricks, stone, whatever. The form shapes the house, shapes the matter that makes the house up. So consider one of the beams of wood that makes the house. Maybe it's a beam in the doorway. That beam instead could have been part of a guillotine. You know what a guillotine is? Right. So just as matter is affected, conditioned by form, form depends on matter, in Aristotle's scheme at least. Because for the form of the house to be actualized, it needs some matter to impinge upon, to shape. So philosophy needs science, it needs its matter in that sense. But philosophy conditions science, envelops it, integrates it, gives it its ultimate power and significance, just as the form of the house does to the bricks and timber that make it up. Without form, those aren't a shelter. Without philosophy, scientific theories cannot comprise a worldview, a vision of reality. That's the kind of house that philosophers build. The second thing, Stroud says philosophy relies from the outset on science, that it begins by accepting the deliverances of science and experience. I would add that it doesn't need to go on accepting those at face value. It can change them, it can transform them, if need be, if that's what it takes to build an organic whole out of human knowledge. Stroud himself, as he continues the passage, retreats a bit from this idea. The thing that Godfrey Smith describes as the processing role of philosophy. Stroud talks instead about philosophy as reflection on the relation between our beliefs of reality, and the detached philosophy that is the detached scrutiny of our beliefs. This must be understood in a special way if it's to amount to the philosophical crest. I don't like this at all. Philosophy's got to be more than reflection and detached scrutiny, I think. I'll try and describe a bit further now this idea that philosophy relates to science as form to matter. I'll make it a bit more concrete for you. So, I mean, it's kind of a cliche or trope that philosophy is more abstract than science in some sense, right? But in what sense exactly? This view receives its ultimate expression maybe in Plato and his divided line, which is an ordering of kinds of knowledge and of the objects of knowledge on the left, from inferior to superior. At the bottom of the line are reflections and sense images, the imagistic impositions that the world makes on our senses and the senses of animals. We've got this in common with animals, this part. It's just the world hitting your senses and creating sensations. For Plato, these basic empirical data are blind, they're without meaning, but they're also in a way contradictory. They don't make sense. So, there's an example in the Republic. See if I can get this right, your ring finger is longer than your index finger, but shorter than your middle finger. So it's long and short at the same time. But nothing can be long and short at the same time. That doesn't make sense. Again, a table is presented as one thing, but also as many or several. It has 4 legs and a top. Or as Democritus said before Plato, it's made of many, many, many teeming atoms. So it's one thing and it's many things. But something can't be one and many at the same time. That doesn't make sense. That's impossible. So Plato, this sort of way, is led to conclude that the material world, the world that the senses present to us, and that we form beliefs about at this second stage, this could be called opinion, really. They're calling this whole thing opinion, but opinion could be there. Judgments about sensory experience. The material world is metaphysically incoherent because it presents these contradictory things to us. Hence, it's unreal. So the aim of his epistemology is to rise above the world, get to the top where philosophers live, where the objects of knowledge make sense, they're consistent, the forms. That's where you get knowledge and our epistemic relation to them and truth. So when you reach the top of the divided line, you make this jump up to philosophy via maths, because maths is good because it's like a bridge from the world to the forms, because maths thinks about the true one, not the one that's also made of many, but the indivisible one. So it's already talking about the form of oneness, not the one that you get from the world. So it helps you to get a stepping stone between the world and philosophy at the top. And the world, let's see. So the forms are what philosophers grasp, us guys. Ideally stable, coherent, eternal and unchanging natures, which are fit to be the contents of truth and knowledge. The world tries to it wants to be like the forms, so it participates in them or it patterns itself on them in some incoherent, confused way. But it's derivative of the forms. So the reality is kind of top down here. This is a shadow of reality, which kind of wants to be like the forms, but can't. It can only be so in a confused way. So Platonic philosophy, much like the Platonic soul, like if you read the dialogue where Socrates is dying and all his friends are always he's about to take the hemlock. It's the Phaedo, I think. His friends are all like, aren't you really upset that you're going to be dying in a minute? And he's like, I'm not. I'm really chuffed. I'm really happy because in a minute I'm going to be able to fly up and hang out with the forms. My soul's going to be going off to the forms. No more of this horrible meat and world. I'll be contemplating eternity. So likewise, philosophical knowledge for Plato wants to get away from the material world as far as possible. The only genuine kind of knowledge is really very abstract. So I don't think that's right. Philosophy and knowledge can't be so abstract, so removed from the concrete physical world, which is the direct source of empirical data in the way Plato does. But his view is quite helpful to mark a pole in this discussion about the relation of science and philosophy. So take it as an extreme, one extreme. What's undoubtedly true is that science, empirical endeavor, and direct theorizing about the empirical, for example, the attempt to formulate a single set of physical laws that will tell you what will happen in a cloud chamber, what will happen on a billiards table, what will happen in the night sky tonight. This enterprise is more closely connected to observation and philosophy, clearly. I mean, Hume probably isn't right that scientific laws are just generalizations from observations. Popper is probably not right that science can be scientific theories can be flat out refuted by empirical observations. But clearly science is more sensitive in some way, must take account of empirical observations in a way that philosophy doesn't need to do or needs to do less so. So a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, an Italian lab seemed to get a signal that traveled faster than the speed of light. And there was like a very brief, no, you don't remember this? There was the briefest of incredible sensations in science, like the speed of light's been broken. Scientists had to do something about this. They had to say something about this. They had to either tinker with the theory, do some more experiments or something. They just had to, couldn't be ignored. That sort of thing is familiar from like Quine Duhem, right? You got to adjust the web in response to observations. It's just not clear that philosophy's got to jump up in that way and react in the face of a dissonant empirical observation. Its relationship is more distant to the empirical observations, which is not to say, as Plato does, that it is or should be entirely detached from them. There must be something in the middle. So here's my suggestion, and I've got no better argument for it than that to me it sounds kind of good, and it seems to capture various intuitions and also fit with things that wiser authors than I am have said. As observations are matter for science, so scientific theories aim to put together, harmonize, make sense of empirical facts, ultimately with the aim of formulating laws so that we can make predictions about what we're going to see and explain further such facts. So scientific theories in turn are matter for philosophy. So philosophy again, just as science tries to integrate, harmonize the observations, philosophy tries to integrate, harmonize, and make sense of the scientific theories. The way science makes sense of observations is to turn them into regularities and laws and theories. So quantum physics, for example, is unprecedentedly good at doing this, at predicting experimental results. But this is a point that's often been made, like by Bertrand Russell, for example. Science is in a way rather uninterested in what the world is like, other than as that concerns how the things in the world behave. And how the things behave is really mostly understood as a matter of what observations they're going to generate for us. Right? Einstein really didn't like this feature of quantum mechanics, famously. It told us impeccably what observations were likely to be made in the cloud chamber with what probabilities, but it was completely non-committal about what was going on in the cloud chamber. Was there an electron there pursuing a continuous path that we only got intermittent glimpses of? Was there something with itself, an intermittent existence, hopping around like a flea? Or was it foolish to even talk about the electron as like a thing there independently of the observations we make and of the, going beyond what we observe to an ontological posit? All of those interpretations of quantum and more were available, and they're all consistent with what we see. Einstein wanted to go beyond them. He thought there was some kind of secret, hidden variable or hidden realm below the quantum, which explained the observations in a more deterministic way, of which quantum theory was just a stochastic or probabilistic approximation. His opponent was Niels Bohr, and they fought it out at the famous debate at the Solvay conference in 1927. And Bohr urged, we've no need to go beyond the data. That's just no need to go there. What we can see, what we can formalize, anything else is gratuitous, just posits. Bohr wanted to let the mathematics and the observations be the limit of the ontology. So at Solvay, the way they argued was Einstein would bring to breakfast every morning a sketch that he'd been working on all night of a light box, a thought experiment trying to refute quantum. Bohr would take it away for the day, think about it, and come and explain later why it didn't work. It didn't refute quantum theory. The other physicists around them, watching these two geniuses having this fight, accused them of doing philosophy. And that's what they were doing. It was an attempt, especially on Einstein's part, to frame the scientific theory within a broader worldview, to say what the background ontology was, what was really there. He wasn't content with its quantum's ability to tell us what we would see, to make predictions, to tell us that there's going to be this in the cloud chamber or that on the photographic plate in the two-slit experiment, I mean. He wanted to know what the world was like, what was its ultimate nature, such that it should manifest in this way to us. So all the interpretations of quantum, like Copenhagen, hidden variables, many worlds, they all can be seen in this light. They're all attempts to accommodate or make sense of the Schrödinger equation, which is the heart of quantum, plus the things we actually see, the observations we actually make. Each one puts the theoretical framework, the quantum formalism, within a broader ontology, giving metaphysical meaning to the physics in terms of the nature of the world physics describes. Be that one where consciousness collapses the wave function, or one where there's no collapse, just a branching of possibilities, as in the many worlds interpretation. So if I'm right that scientific theories, what I'm saying, they're matter for forms of philosophy, if that's right, philosophy is twice removed from the empirical facts. But since scientific theories embody those facts, seeking to harmonize them into a coherent whole, and philosophy's uptake, its food, is those scientific theories, so to speak, its food, then the empirical facts are present in philosophy too, albeit in an attenuated way. They're not wholly missing as they are in Plato's picture. The aim is not to get rid of them. So that explains, I think, why philosophy is rather more detached than science from the observations, but also why they're not irrelevant to it. They're present in it. But they're not directly relevant to disproving a philosophical theory. It doesn't work like that. And that's a point that's often been observed. Is things, you with me? But anyone want to ask a question at this point? No, I can't. No clarification or anything like that? No, so far so good. So I've given the Einstein-Bohr debate as a small example of what I mean, but I'm now going to give you a bit more of an in-depth case study from philosophy of cognoscere. Should help make these ideas a bit more concrete. So in philosophy of mind and cognoscere, there's a lively debate which Ned Block started in 1995 about whether consciousness overflows cognition and cognitive access. So one of Block's examples is as follows. Imagine you're having an intense conversation. In fact, you know what? What's that sound? It's like a humming sound. Is it the projector? Okay, good. So perfect example. I just noticed the projector sound, right? It's been there all along, but I just noticed it, and now I'm talking about it. And I could say, you know what? That's really bothering me. We could do something about it now. Was I hearing it before I noticed it? In Bloch's example, it's a drill sound. You're in an intense conversation, you suddenly notice a drilling sound, maybe because it stops. Were you hearing it before you noticed it? He says, of course you were. Otherwise, how could you notice it stop? And how could you say that you're sure it's been going on all the time as well? You must have been hearing it. But were you attending to it? Could you have said or done anything about it before you noticed it? No, he says, you couldn't. In a way, you were, cognitively speaking, oblivious to it. It may as well not have been there for you, even though it was part of what you were experiencing, part of what it was like to be you, in Thomas Nagel's phrase. So Bloch concludes, you had conscious experience that overflowed your cognitive access. You had like this much consciousness, including the sound, but only this much cognitive access. And the sound was outside of the access. You couldn't. So what he means by that is you couldn't report on it, you couldn't do anything about it or anything with it. Only once you notice the sound can you say, oh yeah, there's been drilling, or shut the window, or something like that. Let me give you another example. So in the Sperling experiment, subjects are shown a 3x3 array of letters. Well, let's do this Sperling experiment. I'm going to show you a 3x3 array of letters. for half a second. Just look at them and try and remember them. Ready? Who knows Sperling already? Okay, well,
Not for
it won't help, as we know. Bottom row, please.
the
Great. Top row.
FHRO,
Can you do the bottom row?
DNBA.
Oh, because they said. Okay, good. Well, maybe you could anyway. Okay, anyway. Very good. So I do this with students, and about 50% of the time it goes as it's supposed to go. As it's supposed to go is like this. So in the real experiment, the rows get cued by a tone, high, middle, low. So the results are really interesting. People can generally report any row, but only one. After that, they can't say what else they saw. But it could be any of the rows. But they do report having seen all the letters. So they say, I saw all the letters, but they can only report one row, but any one row, that's cool. So here's how Block interprets this. Subjects, he says, have experience of all the letters, because they say they do, but they cannot seem to cognitively access all the letters they see, right? They can access at most one of the rows, the one they report. And after that, they can't get at the rest. There's a cognitive bottleneck, he says. There's more experience than cognition can get a grip on. The visual experience outstrips the ability of cognition to access it. Opponents reject the idea that consciousness could overflow cognition. I'm going to explain their reasoning in a bit. I guess I'm one of the opponents if I put my cards on the table. So the way opponents interpret the cases is like this. They say with the drill sound or the projector sound, you weren't consciously hearing the sound, you were unconsciously perceiving it. And then when you pay attention to it, so you've got a representation of it going on unconsciously, you pay attention, now it becomes conscious, and now I can talk about it and do stuff about it. When I recall having heard it, what I'm doing is activating this representation that was there unconsciously and making it conscious. So there was no time at which there was a conscious but unaccessed content. With the Sperling array, they say you've got a kind of gisty, sketchy overall visual experience of it, but not a full detailed conscious experience. What you do have is a full detailed unconscious image of it. And when I say bottom row, you kind of zero in on that and you activate that and you make that conscious. But you can't do it for the rest. There was never a time when a full detailed conscious representation existed, but which was not accessible to cognition. So if you're clear about those interpretations, notice how they both can absorb what happens in the lab. They absorb the fact that subjects say they see all the letters. Subjects can tell you any one row, but no more than that. And their inability to report all the letters in detail. But they're radically different hypotheses, radically different. On one of them, there exists this consciousness that's unregistered and unaccessed, unreportable, a kind of secret well or pool of what it's likeness that in a sense you don't even know you have. The other one says you can only experience what you can talk about, in effect, which is a weird idea. And there's another secret well or pool, this time of unconscious perceptual representations that are part of your psychological life, but you don't know about them because they're unconscious. Those are both odd views, uncomfortable views in their way. Does anybody know what Block says about general anesthetic? I always tell my students this at the end of the lecture. You don't? Fantastic. So general, right? You think you go for an operation. I mean, as opposed to local anesthetic you get at the dentist. Local is fine, by the way, don't worry. But general, he says, if you read the 1995 paper, doesn't get rid of the pain. Doesn't kill your pain. You feel the pain totally while you're unconscious. It's just that you can't cognitively access it. So you can't report on it, you can't act on it, and you can't remember it afterwards. So you feel this pain that's cognitively inaccessible. Terrifying. And an odd view, I put it to you, a counterintuitive view. But these two theories agree completely on the empirical data. Very interesting. You may also know or have heard of the two visual streams hypothesis. Two visual streams? No? Okay, I'm going to explain it briefly. I'm going to be talking more about this tomorrow if you're interested. This is a bit of advertising. So the idea is we've got two visual streams. So wait, There we go. So, visual information comes in, lateral geniculate nucleus and processing primary visual cortex goes up the office tower of edges, shapes, color processing. Then the visual system spits it into these two further streams. The dorsal stream, which goes to motor areas, and the ventral stream, which goes to frontal, supposedly executive areas, thought and all that stuff, maybe consciousness. The let's see, the ventral stream is what you use when you survey a scene or when you go shopping and you're picking out things by color and shape. I want that cereal, I want that t-shirt. Color, shape, semantic properties, identifying objects, slow, deliberate, intentional. The ventral stream is what you use to grab a ball out of the air that's flying at your face, or hit a ball in baseball, or reach and grasp a cup. Calibrating your fingers perfectly to the size of the cup, even though your brain has got to calculate on the basis of the relation between your eyes and the cup, the relation between your hand and the cup. It's an incredibly complicated calculation that we can't really get robots to do very well, but we do it flawlessly. Are you aware of any complicated mathematical calculations when you reach and grip a cup? No. So people say the dorsal stream does all this, just computes it all completely unconsciously. It's like a robot arm. We set tasks, grab my cup, and it somehow does the calculations. We don't know anything about it. So it gets called the zombie stream. People call it the zombie stream. So no consciousness there, no what it's likeness. Consciousness here, mere robotic computational arm here. Recently, Wayne Wu, who I like very much, philosopher, has argued that actually, for all we know, there may well be consciousness in the dorsal stream, a stream of conscious visual experiences of things. Because really, all we know about the dorsal stream is you can't introspect it. Well, that doesn't mean there isn't consciousness there. So Wu thinks it might be a case of Locke style overflowing consciousness that we just can't cognitively access. His basis for this, which is very interesting for this talk, is that the empirical data doesn't tell us which interpretation is true at all. It just doesn't say anything about it. All we know of the neurophysiology from the brain scans, the experimental results, how people behave who've got various kinds of brain damage, that's all completely consistent, doesn't do anything to settle the issue. So as I say, I'll be talking more about this tomorrow, but if Wu is right about that, and I think he is, then to go beyond the data of overflow, the empirical regularities we can describe them very well. We know if someone's got damage to dorsal stream, they'll be able to describe the scene very well. For example, one of the experiments is give the person a letter and ask them to post it through a letterbox. And the letterbox gets kind of changes orientation. So they've got to match the orientation of the letter to the letterbox. Person with dorsal stream damage, so motor stream damage, can describe the orientation of the letter perfectly well, say that it matches the slot, and can't post it, just fumbles. The converse damage, someone who's got ventral damage, can't tell you anything about the letter and the orientation of the letterbox. They probably can't even identify it as a letter. They can post it perfectly well. So very interesting. You can predict that depending on whether someone's got ventral or dorsal stream damage. So we've got very good scientific theory in that sense. It predicts very well what's going to happen. Does it tell you what's going on in the dorsal stream? Does it tell you whether there's consciousness in the dorsal stream? No, it doesn't tell you anything about that. It's completely silent about that. To decide that issue and to decide the overflow debate, we've got to go beyond what we see and what we can predict, go beyond the scientific theories in that sense. See how it fits with other things we believe, whether it seems reasonable to us. Does it seem reasonable to you that there's consciousness you have that you can't introspect or report on at all? That's like you can't turn your attention to it or cognize it in any way, but it's part of what it's like to be you. Does that make sense? Who thinks that does make sense? Can you believe in overflow? Hands up. So,
it seems very, very strange.
Yeah, it seems very strange. So David Rosenthal, here he is, Locke's, I hesitate to use the word nemesis, but philosophical opponent, I think they're friends. He argues that this doesn't really make sense, the idea of experiences that you can't register and access. if he says if you can't access a state, it really doesn't register with you at all. You wouldn't miss it if it wasn't there. So in a way, you're unaware of it being there, this drill sound experience or whatever it is. But if you're unaware of it being there, you can't really be said to be conscious of it. That doesn't make sense. So the idea of consciousness that overflows cognition is incoherent, says Rosenthal. I find that reasoning quite persuasive. I mean, there's a lot more you can take for and against it, obviously. But the main issue now is not whether the argument works or whether overflow is viable or whatever. The point is this: we've got some empirical data, we've got scientific theories that correlate what subjects can do with different kinds of brain activity. We can predict what their capacities are going to be. But despite our great ability to describe the situation in those terms, none of that tells us what's going on in reality, whether consciousness can overflow, whether there's consciousness in the dorsal stream. To settle that, we need to go beyond the empirical theories. We need to use them as the basis or substrate for our philosophy. Now, that theory is the philosophical theory, more abstract of necessity than these theories about what subjects can or can't do and what brain damage they have. But that sort of abstractness is a hallmark of the relationship of form to of matter to form. Form is more abstract. Okay, I suppose officially I've got 10 minutes left. I'll be about 10 or 15. Is that okay? And I'm just going to describe a few more features of the matter-form relationship, how it applies to philosophy and science, and then sum up. So don't get the impression that I'm saying philosophy floats free of science in being more abstract. Form needs matter. So philosophy needs to make sense of science, but also common sense, what introspection tells us about consciousness, including such claims as that there are experiences, there are qualitative properties like colors, there are people around us, there are objects in causal relations to each other that we perceive, that what Sellers calls the manifest image. Philosophy needs to make sense of that, and science together. Form needs matter. A blueprint of a house is nothing in itself without material to impinge upon, to shape. Philosophy doesn't have a special subject matter. Its subject matter is, among other things, scientific theories. So that's why I say it's more like a mouth or digestive system than a pair of hands. There is a significant asymmetry, though. Form needs matter. Form does things to matter, form needs matter, but form does things to matter which matter doesn't do to form. So there is a hierarchy. Form isn't really affected by matter. It needs matter. You can't make a house out of marshmallows because the form of the house has to do with shelter. And obviously that wouldn't be very good in the rain. But the form of the house is not really affected itself or conditioned by its matter. But it affects the matter by shaping it, by forming it into a whole in a certain context or configuration. The beam of wood I mentioned earlier that's in the guillotine so imagine it's the beam that the person has to lay their head on before it gets chopped off. Now imagine instead of that, you put it in the house, and now it's another beam they lay their head on, but this time as part of the bed. Quite different positions, contexts, so role, significance, power. That's the idea of form arranging matter. How does philosophy do that to science? We'll consider again the interpretations of quantum. So on the collapse version, when you open the box on Schrodinger's cat, you collapse the wave function, you put the cat into a determinate state, it's alive or dead. Schrodinger's equation says nothing about collapses. I mean, it could be more taken to describe a situation where the cat is 50-50 dead and alive, or dead and alive in one way, dead, alive, like that's what it kind of describes. So it doesn't say anything about what we see. So on this view, there's more to reality on the collapse view than what Schrodinger's equation says. There's the Schrodinger equation and then something else that makes the collapses, and we need to add on something about consciousness or measurements to do that. But on the many worlds model, Everett's model, the Schrodinger equation describes the whole of reality perfectly. It says, reality evolves according to the Schrodinger equation. There are no collapses. We see things in a determinate way. So we see the cat as alive or dead because we also split. when we open the box. There's one version of you seeing the cat alive, one version of you seeing the cat dead. There are no collapses, just splits. So there are two philosophical positions on the empirical theory. They both make sense of the data, or rather, put it this way, there's no experiment we could do that would decide which one of those views is true. But they put the Schrödinger equation in a different place, just like the beam of wood. One of them says the Schrödinger equation is a partial description of reality, but you need to add on some principles about measurement in order to explain what we see. And the other one says, no, it's the whole, it describes the whole of reality perfectly. That's what reality is like. So I think you can see the Schrödinger equation has got quite different implications for reality in those two different views. So that's, I think, the way in which the philosophy gives the science different kind of power in different contexts. And you can see the same thing going on in the debate about overflow, which is why, since Locke started the debate, there have been 3 decades of empirical results have made no difference to the debate between him and Rosenthal at all. It hasn't moved a jot. Okay, so philosophy needs science, but science also needs philosophy. Matter needs form, though in a different way. Because without form, matter's got no identity. That's what Aristotle says. When you ask, what is this? It's form that gives the answer. This is a house. This is a guillotine. This is a human. Otherwise, you've got wood, stones, meat, atoms, not anything in particular. It's form that gives something its identity, its wholeness and significance. So I think the same thing goes for scientific theories without being placed in a philosophical framework. Quantum physics taken by itself says very little. It just says, you'll see such and such in a cloud chamber with such and such probability. You'll see such and such on the photographic plate. What's the ontology? It doesn't say anything about that. To go beyond that, to go beyond the formalism, you're doing philosophy. To answer the question, what is it we're seeing? To be more than a mere mechanics, then you need philosophy to absorb it. Even if you want to say, like I've got a physicist friend, I don't care about your ontology. I just think there's the maths. That's a philosophical position too. Stop at the maths. Now we've got a compound, put them together. Philosophical form combined with empirical theoretical content, as in one of these interpretations, like many worlds, let's say. We've got a worldview, one that incorporates what we know about the behavior of the physical world, the place and nature of consciousness, observations of the world, its relation to medium-sized folk theoretical objects we perceive, and so on. Everything now hangs together, and we know just how it does so, in the way that Sellers was pointing at when he talked about philosophy knowing how things hang together in the beginning. So the compound is given its meaning by philosophy. I'm nearly at the end. A couple more things. So Barry Stroud says, following Bernard Williams, that philosophy is in the business of building an absolute conception of the world, one that includes the view from science and from common sense, Sellers' manifest image, folk psychology, and so on. Philosophy's unique and defining task is to describe the world as it is in itself, the world that is there anyway, says Williams. That's Williams's phrase. To get as best we can at its true or ultimate nature. So that involves, though it doesn't just involve, integrating the perspectives we get from other disciplines. And that, as I've been stressing, that integrating is not a matter of, it's not a question of fitting ready-made static blocks together, but of shaping and creating a coherent worldview out of the matter of the disciplines of human inquiry. Stroud has a useful analogy for this. He says, imagine one person says, the apple in the bowl is to the left. Another person says, no, it's to the right. We fit these claims together by saying something like, well, there must be more than one bowl and apple and table. Or, oh, these people are seeing the same bowl and apple and table, but they're on different sides of it. So as Stroud says, for us to think of them both as cases of knowledge, these two claims about the apple, it must somehow be possible for us to think of them as claims about or perspectives on the same reality. Knowledge. We should think that science, folk psychology, and introspection all give us knowledge. So it needs to be fitted together in this way, the way that Stroud's analogy indicates. Notice that these people's claims about the apple become somewhat transformed in being harnessed in this overall worldview by being put in relation to each other and harmonized. The claim becomes there's an apple to the right or to the left in relation to me, or as things seem to me, or in my experience. So harnessing these claims, putting them together in the absolute conception, doesn't leave them as they were before the integration. It's not just a question of combining different views either. Like Sellers says, you've got the manifest view, you've got the scientific view. They're kind of like looking through a 3D stereogram, one in each eye. It's not quite like that either. He knows full well they've got to be shaped and adjusted to fit into a coherent view of reality. And if the overall vision makes sense, and the only discipline that can judge that is philosophy, then we may hope to have adequately described nature. Last thing, I just want to situate this view which I'm describing, which is probably nothing new. I expect Aristotle said something like this. I just don't know where. Between a couple of other views of human knowledge. So I gave Plato as an example. So I think what Plato gets right is that philosophy in a way is above science, better than science, better than pure empirical disciplines. But he still makes it too detached from them and from the empirical world, which for him is a kind of derivative shadow as opposed to being the source from which our knowledge must nourish itself. Philosophy for Plato is best off escaping the world altogether. Quine has got quite a different view, opposed view. So for him, philosophy and science and everything else are part of a single web, as you probably know. A single fabric, utterly flat. No levels, no hierarchy. In fact, there's no clear difference between science and philosophy or gap between them. Maybe not even different norms for them to obey. Beliefs at the center of this web are harder to give up. They're more embedded. So they have that, but they're not impossible to give up in the face of contrary evidence. But here's the thing, in that center can be Aristotle's logical laws, the things he says you need to presuppose in order to say anything at all, and the speed of light, or Planck's constant, what we would think of as empirical claims. They've got no difference in status, really, as far as Quine's concerned. Well, they need not. So in that picture, what's right about it is that philosophy is continuous with science, not aloof from it, as Plato says. But I think this picture is wrong as well, because there is a hierarchy. Human inquiries are not all on the same playing field, because some of them aim to take in and harmonize the empirical world or the observations we make. And others, or one in particular, aims to take in and harmonize those theories and make sense of them. The human sciences are not all matter. Some of them, at least, are matter for the form of one other. And it in turn is form for their matter. So the form of human knowledge, the essence of it, I would say, is philosophy. That's it.
Questions, comments, voice, so rather short and probably expected questions. So what would be your response to the claim that unlike in science and philosophy, there hasn't been any progress since the early philosophers? Any real progress?
What do you think about that question?
I don't agree with that claim, but I would like to hear your argument.
I guess I don't know what would count as progress. I mean, we've certainly come up with a lot of theories.
Well, I can't remember the name
Yeah.
of the guy that claims it, but I think that he himself provides the example of Aristotle. For example, if Aristotle were resurrected today and he ventured into a lesson on physics in the university, he wouldn't understand anything.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if he went into a lecture on metaphysics, he would rather quickly or immediately be able to engage in debates and so on.
Yeah.
So if this is true, then it for the author of the claim, it shows that in philosophy there hasn't really been any progress, while in science there has been a significant.
So I tried to flip that argument round. I mean, I said,
Yeah.
there are important questions. How does perception work? Is mind different from body? was the universe created. We could add to that, is light a fluid or a particle? Are there atoms or are there not? Is the universe one thing or many things? None of those issues are settled. They're still debated with, the empirical picture's changed a lot, but they're still debated just as fiercely as ever. Those are viable questions. Has science made any progress on them? I would say no. So I set you a challenge at the beginning. Tell me if you think I'm wrong about that. But I don't think our empirical advances have made any dent on those questions at all. They've given us new things to think about, which is cool.
But then one could claim that the progress hasn't been made in this part of science that is more philosophical-like, but a vast amount of progress has been made on the empirical side of science. So unlike in philosophy, so we have the same debates or parallel debates like we had 2.5
Yes.
millennia ago.
These are difficult questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's surprising that we haven't got an answer to them. You say there's been a lot of progress in science, but set aside the practical advances. I now have a mobile phone, which I didn't have 20 years ago. Healthcare's better, everything's better. We have vaccines, we have what stuff, R's and so on. I've just lost my point. Hang on one second. Right, yeah, no. What does the success of science consist in other than predicting what we're going to see? So Newton's mechanics was good, but it didn't work for very small things. And then they had all these problems at the beginning of the 20th century with the colored light coming out of atoms wasn't predicted by the theory. They had to change it. Then you got quantum. Now quantum is incredible at predicting what we're going to see. Okay, we have trouble meshing it with relativity and all that. But what's improved in this so-called progress, and I've set aside the practical advances, is our ability to predict what we're going to see. Now, do we want to stop there, or do we want to say, what is it we're seeing? What is the world such that it produces observations? Those are questions that philosophy answers, not science answers. So science, I'm sorry to say, taken in its pure sense, is a rather superficial exercise. It's the exercise of getting a formalism that predicts very well what you're going to see in a cloud chamber without saying anything about what is in the cloud chamber. So tell me if that's really a big deal or not. You're doubtful about that. I mean, is that a big deal or not? That progress?
Well, you took example from quantum physics, but I don't know, to take example from agricultural sciences or medicine or something else, it seems that we have that science achieved better explanations of the world, of certain phenomena in the world. So it seems that science really has helped us to better not only understand, not only explain, but understand some phenomena. While philosophy, if one were to be not so generous to philosophy, it could be claimed that we have simply refined the debates that were there from the beginning almost.
But I mean, okay, so good. So you say, well, we've got molecular explanations of chemistry of things in biology. We've got gene theory. We've got all these mechanisms, right?
Or even on the more basic level. For example, we today have a better explanation of what is the function of a heart than Aristotle had, or something like that.
Yes, but these disciplines bracket questions such as, what is a molecule? A molecule is made of atoms. What are atoms? They're made of quarks, protons, and so on. So now, if we want to know what it's actually talking about, the science can't tell us. So it brackets certain questions. It talks about mechanisms. It talks about molecules. It talks about these entities without saying anything about what they are, except that they're composed of things from smaller levels of science. But it brackets and it postpones that question. What is the world that it's describing? If we don't know what we're talking about, we don't know what it's quantifying over. But that's not an issue that science can tell you about.
All right, but on the other hand, what would you say directly to the, okay, so someone asks you, okay, please illustrate, so if you can clear this up for me, so you're claiming that the progress that science has made is not very significant in comparison to philosophy, or
Not
you would claim more pessimistically that neither philosophy nor
right.
science have achieved significant
Yeah.
progress.
Okay.
Or if someone asks you, please illustrate the progress in philosophy. I can I don't know, point out to some examples in logic. Okay, so we have achieved some progress in logic, but in other areas of philosophy, can you pinpoint an example where significant progress?
But are you talking about consensus? So I mean, I don't think we should mistake progress for consensus. Plato had forms, Aristotle had a more material version of the forms, Leibniz had a very different ontology altogether, Spinoza had a cool ontology, Descartes had a cool ontology, Bertrand Russell had a cool ontology, neutral monism, I kind of like that. There's been physicalism, there's been epiphenomenal dualism, many positions we've developed that the Greeks didn't know about. So Aristotle, when you say he walks into the metaphysical class, has to learn about all those. And now he asks, which is the dominant, which is the right one? Well, we don't know. But we don't know which is the dominant, which is the correct interpretation of quantum physics either. And that's a vigorous argument. So one of those options may be right, or it may be something we haven't come up with yet. If one of them's right, then clearly we've made progress. So progress is not the same thing as consensus. Yeah, I don't want to be too harsh on science. I'm just saying that the progress, aside from the obvious, the practical progress that no one would play down, the theoretical progress is in a sense superficial, in the sense of not telling you what is really there. It describes the behavior. I mean, Russell said this ad nauseam, but it doesn't tell you what's going on. And
Yeah, I would have an example, and maybe Vito will agree that would maybe come in favor of your claim. For example, in molecular biology. So molecular biologists, or in textbooks, university textbooks, or even in scientific papers, they have certain claims about what goes on at the molecular level in the cell. But when you ask them, oh, okay, so this seems to be kind of metaphorical, but what really goes on, they can't provide an answer.
There's a model. There's a model.
Yeah.
Models are great, but models are models of something.
Yeah. Okay, Matthew.
Thanks, Sam. I really enjoyed your talk. So I have the following question, and it instantly reminded me. I gave a talk on Philip Frank. He was a logical empiricist. A couple of years ago, I gave a talk, and he considered the question, what is the role of metaphysics, right?
Yeah.
And he basically said that the role of metaphysics and of metaphysicians, overly simplified, is more or less like a pedagogical role, right? So they take scientific theories as a kind of input, and then they try to systematize it, and the ideal output would be a form of explanation of these scientific theories to the general audience, to the general public, right?
Okay.
So this is Philip Frank. And when I gave this talk on one seminar, a couple of professors asked me the question, okay, this is all well and good and a nice, interesting idea, but why do we need metaphysics for this? Why do we leave this job to the scientists, right, to do the outreach, popularization, and whatnot? And so I may have completely missed the point, and I'm not sure if this question is relevant to your talk, but couldn't someone say something along the following lines? Okay, scientific theories need their form, right? But wouldn't scientists, in a sense, do the job that philosophers try to do? I hesitate to say better, but at least in the start of their inquiry, they're obviously going to be way more informed on the matter. And if they're way more informed on the matter, then they may be more productive on the form when they try to produce the form, right? I mean, we can always say, no, leave the scientists to, crunch the numbers, do the maths, whatever. We're going to, deal with the form. But I guess there is always a couple of philosophically minded scientists who would love to do the molding of the form. So again, I'm not sure if this applies to the thing. How would you respond to this?
No, it's a great question.
Just curious.
You understand exactly. So it's a great question. I noticed I was talking about philosophy and science, not philosophers and scientists. So scientists obviously do philosophy. Einstein was very philosophical. Schrodinger as well. Schrodinger's cat is his way of saying, this is crazy.
Yeah.
How can this be true? Like, what version of reality does this really speak about? So yeah, you're right. In a sense, perhaps we could leave it to the scientists, but they would be doing philosophy. They would need some philosophical tools, and they would need to know logic. They would need to think about other kinds of metaphysics. I mean, when I talk to not psychologists, because psychologists for some reason don't seem to take philosophy of mind very seriously. Neuroscientists take it a bit more seriously, in my experience. And when I say, well, you see here's your theories, yours, for example, one thing that's really noticeable about neuroscience is they seem to assume internalism is true. They find themselves talking about the visual cortex and generations of colors and edge processing and stuff. And they seem to, they don't say it exactly like this, but there's like a little image being built up in there. They just assume internalism. And I say, have you thought that maybe there's no image in there, there's just colors and stuff out there? Naive realism. And they're like, oh my God, mate, would that fit? Well, it does fit, arguably. So you can give them a new perspective in that way that they wouldn't have hit upon because they're not philosophically trained. They haven't got the experience. They're doing, quite rightly, their very detailed business. It's our job to have those options available. Conversely, when I find out about this two visual streams thing or blind sight, they're like incredible thought experiments I couldn't have come up with myself. And it makes me think consciousness, how does it relate, qualitative character? So I get stuff from them for theorizing. They get stuff from me to think about other options for the data. So we need both. So yeah, my answer is the scientists could do it, but they'd be doing philosophy. So they would need philosophical help. If we all died, put it that way, they would need to go and read Aristotle and everybody up, the good people, whoever they are up to now. So yes, is that an answer?
Yeah.
But you get it exactly. But we need both. I mean, think about it. Even in science, you get like a bunch of studies, and then someone does a review paper of all the studies. But you can go a level above that. Well, here's that theory. What about other theories? Now you're doing philosophy. It's just going to happen. It's inevitable. You can't get rid of it. And that's why I think it's ridiculous for someone to write a book, saying, what is the use of philosophy? Unless it was just to say, of course it's useful. It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. Just like you can't just have matter. It's going to be made into something. Then it's given it a form. So that it's inevitable. They sorry, I'm getting overexcited. They constitutively depend on each other. That's what I meant by saying that.
Thanks.
Do you agree?
Okay, but that little bit of metaphysics or philosophy, scientists can do just by common sense. They don't
Really?
need a special vocation, philosophers.
Are you serious?
Sure.
You are?
Oh, well,
You're talking yourself out of a job.
well, this is a question.
I don't think so. I mean,
Taylor law of excluded middle or something. Come on, everybody
okay,
knows
that. But look, okay, so I gave a talk to my psychology department at Hertfordshire about the thing we talk about tomorrow. The idea that instead of there being consciousness that overflows, there are like unconscious qualia. It's going to be quite weird, but I'm going to explain this tomorrow. And they were like unconscious pains and stuff like that. They were like, what the hell? And they were so resistant to the idea, partly because they'd never heard of it before. It's not something they would have come up with or bothered with. It's kind of similar when I talk to vision scientists about, and I say, have you thought about externalism? They're in a way reluctant to accept it just because it's new. They wouldn't have bothered thinking about it. So their theoretical horizons are rather narrowed by not having philosophical help. And that's one of the things that that's one of the concrete things we can do.
Yeah, I mean, your answer to Matthias' question is it's a matter of degree. How much philosophy do we need to justify our jobs?
I don't think we need to justify our jobs. I'm just saying you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. You may say that it's useless. You can't really believe it. You can't really believe it, and you can't get rid of it. And it's inevitable. And once you see that what we do is actually really important. Really important.
Emma.
Okay, I'm writing my PhD on mental philosophy, so I'm really interested in your talk, but I don't know if my question will make sense. So, you said that, as far as I understood, that philosophy is the form, and then science is the subject. Does is that always the case? I mean, you focus mostly on philosophy of mind, whereas the link between philosophy of mind and neuroscience, and then you can also go into physics, is quite strong.
Yeah.
But what about philosophy of arts, language,
Yeah.
philosophy of politics?
Yeah.
Are people like Martin Nussbaum, Martisan, and Rawls, and Grice, and Austin actually discussing social sciences? What are they doing? Because at one point you said it is among other things,
Yeah.
science. But what are these then other things? What are those other philosophers doing?
This is another great question. It's really makes me happy because it means that I got it across to you guys. Yeah, I don't want to say that's all it does, and I don't want to say the relation of philosophy to other disciplines or other questions is always like that. I was talking particularly about its relation to science. I do think that so maybe it's like this, maybe. When it comes to our theories, so there aren't just scientific theories, there are folk theories as well. Here's a folk theory. There's a bunch of people sitting around me. There are a bunch of objects sitting around me with which I'm in perceptual causal relations. I've existed for some time. I endure, I don't perdure. Philosophy needs to take that as matter and make sense of it as well. And part of the job is to fit that with what science tells us. That's the thing that people talk about integration. There are a bunch of theories. There are theories about consciousness, your consciousness. I'm having experience, or this is just an illusion, or whatever. So it needs to fit those things together. That doesn't mean its attitude to every domain is that it takes hold of theories. Maybe in some cases it takes hold of the world. Maybe when it comes to ethics, philosophy just grabs the world directly. Maybe when it comes to politics, it just grabs the world directly. I don't probably know enough to know, though I do teach like the Republic and stuff. I don't know. What do you think? Is it plausible? Is it remotely plausible that Nussbaum and rules and stuff are? I don't think it is it? They're just as it were, doing work on social science theories. They're not, are they? They're talking about things, aren't they? Which one?
The former, I don't believe
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
using stuff from
Yeah. Yeah.
sociology.
They're talking about the world, moral values, society, people. Yeah, that seems to me right. So maybe there are some areas where philosophy just it talks about things directly. But I wanted to talk about the relation of it to science in particular because I'm enervated by this claim that science can do all the work and we don't need philosophers. And I don't know if you know, but in Australia, do you know about the funding of higher education in Australia right now? If you're a humanities student, you have to pay more than if you're a science student. Science students now get grants from the government because science is better, more useful, blah, blah, blah. You have to pay more to do a philosophy degree because it's a useless hobby, supposedly. That's terrible. Wrong, it's wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of bad philosophy done. Maybe mine is bad philosophy, I don't know. We just do our best. So, it's not that there's every bit of philosophy is worthwhile, but we don't know unless we try. Is that an answer?
Yeah, basically.
Well, I have one about this Cratylus. I didn't get the point. One was showing the finger. How are you that without philosophy, the science will end up just like Cratylus or something like that?
Oh no, I was saying. Oh no, sorry. That was talking about the attempt to say that philosophy is useless. I said it's paradoxical. So if Kitcher's book is paradoxical, what's the use of philosophy? It's a paradox. Because what's he doing? He's doing philosophy. Does he think the question of whether philosophy matters or not is an important question? Presumably, because he writes a book about it. Well, if his book, which is a bit of philosophy, can settle that question, that shows that philosophy can settle big questions. There's your answer. Game over. So I don't know. It seems to me if you go that way, you're going to end up. You're not going to end up literally as Cratylus. It was just an analogy. The point is, Aristotle says there are things people say, but it doesn't mean they believe them. Aristotle doesn't think that Heraclitus believes everything really is in flux and the laws of logic are in flux. He can't believe it because if he really believed it, he wouldn't say it. To say it, things have got to stay still from the start of my sentence to the end. I have to be able to say, I am here, and not just be a totally different clump of atoms at the end. Things have got to sit still for a minute. If you read Theaetetus, which I'm sure some of you have, but maybe the best thing ever written. Philosophy, Plato makes real fun of that view that nothing stays still for a second. And so yeah, I'm just saying you may say philosophy is useless, but you can't really believe it. You can't, because you're doing philosophy and you can't get rid of it.
That's
That's the point.
this is the analogy for
Yeah.
you can say it, but you can't really believe it. Yeah, Philip.
Yeah, I was wondering about the limits of philosophy and science. We seem to address some things and build up theories, and perhaps none can be built.
And sorry, and
none can be built.
in philosophy,
No, in general.
in general,
For example, back to quantum mechanics.
yeah,
So if I got the debate in the proper manner, if it is put correctly, the Copenhagen school claimed that there is this that we can that the universe is indeterministic, while the Broglie and the Einstein were that it is deterministic,
yeah.
and they would like argue about it, but they couldn't give any measurement, because if they tried to make a measurement, the measurement device would be included within the
Yeah.
measurement, and then things would get, let's say, bubbled up, and you would end up anywhere. So, and this is the limit. So,
Right.
now, so what could a science was anti-philosophical say? He could say just there's no need to discuss whether there is something or not, whether the universe is deterministic or indeterministic.
Yeah.
So where the science stops, it stops where the data stops.
Yeah.
If we cannot get any further than the data we have, then these things are not worth discussing.
Yeah.
We should not discuss them at all.
Yeah.
It seems to me, another example, for example, there's a question about what's the meaning of the universe, life, and
Yeah.
everything else about the sun. 42. That's
Mm.
it's a meaningless question. So, are we sometimes philosophers? We tend to do that, to go, let's say, on the other side and just pose questions that are senseless.
Are you saying? So what are you saying? We
That's where are the limits? This is
Yeah.
the question would be that
yeah.
I'm sympathetic to your view.
Yeah.
It's just trying to figure out whether there is a limit. Is there a limit?
Right.
Should we discuss limits?
I see. So we might be. You're saying we might just be stuck and
Yeah.
unable to get a good theory.
I think that we sometimes perhaps do ask some questions that are irrelevant.
I see.
Absurd
Okay.
questions, actually.
Irrelevant to what? I mean, irrelevant.
They cannot be answered.
But then that doesn't make them irrelevant, right? So quantum physics enables me to build a better computer or get a better scanner. The scanner helps me diagnose my disease quicker. I get medicine quicker, and I live. I live longer than I would have. Why do I want to do that? I want to spend time with my family. I don't want to die so soon. Then I'm dying, and I'm like, what was it all for? What was my life for? Who are these people anyway? I mean, I assume they're real. What's going to happen to me now?
If the ontological question beyond it is, in a sense, irrelevant.
But it's not irrelevant because you want
It's pragmatic.
But pragmatic.
That come out of it, of having a theory about quantum mechanics and good are fruitful and great use for us. But the question whether the world is deterministic or indeterministic or are there objects?
Okay. I think you're trying to. So I don't think you can get rid of the philosophy altogether. I don't really believe in this pragmatics thing, right? Pragmatics is taking the various things for granted. There is an external world. There are other people. These things are not mind dependent. There are other minds, so on and so forth. It's taking a whole bunch of philosophical things for granted. It's just doesn't want to talk about them, but it is assuming them. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to be pragmatic about other than my own sensations. And presumably that's not pragmatism, because it wouldn't matter if I died right now. My life wouldn't be better for being longer. In fact, there wouldn't be things of value. So they're trying to put something in a box that's going to break out, namely philosophical ideas and pieces. It's going to break out. These questions will lead to other questions. it'll proliferate, and quite soon we'll be talking about logic, objects, determinism, because they'll wonder, am I free, and so on and so forth. So I guess I don't think it's plausible it can be confined in that way. I think for some people, and my dear physicist friend Paul, who's at King's in London, he's a very good physicist, often says these quite instrumentalist, pragmatic things. But I think that that is a great comfort to him to live to people like that. So it's part of their way of making sense of the world and being comfortable and living in the world. I'm not sure they really believe it, and I don't think it can be confined in that way. Yeah.
But should we find some kind of demarcation between when we start doing bad philosophy?
But how could we know? I mean,
Yeah.
do we do bad philosophy? Do we try our best? What else can we do?
But we ask sometimes end up doing strange things.
Yeah, but we tried our best, and
I'm trying to post something that I don't know what to do with this. but yes, yeah.
I don't know. I never written on this before. I hoped I wasn't talking nonsense. We just do our best, don't we? I mean, you can tell me it's nonsense and I can stop. But we just, all we can do is our best. Things don't go anywhere sometimes, but other times they do. We're not omniscient, so
No, it's a good idea too.
yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Share much of your
Oh, that's nice.
we about two things. Why do we need scientists if we can be everyone?
The opposite.
But I mean, I really liked the two pictures putting Legos together and doing the other thing. But I guess my question is, in order to really properly do the form, right? You need to know something about the matter. So
Yeah.
why don't we just cut them out, save their money, and have
Yeah.
one form department? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the whole expertise.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, and this is just Emma and me, Emma is my brilliant student, and we're struggling with these questions quite a lot. We do art, and nobody in the art world really cares about us, to the point that going back now to 30 years, every now and then there is a book which says, no one who does literature ever really read any of the philosophy of literature. No one who does films has ever really engaged with aesthetics, etc., etc. This thing seems to, even my students, when I teach philosophy of literature to general population, they go like, who cares about the nature of fictional characters? I mean, they just can't see the relevance of the expression along the lines that Philip would say. So I guess quite angry by this state of the play. Malcolm Turvey has just published an amazing book on humanistic explanation, saying that actually it is the scientists who are doing the bad job, in the sense that they can do a little bit, but philosophy does the most. And then the kind of the questions that scientists are completely incapable of addressing are the questions of value and the questions of norms.
Yeah.
But then it seems that there's so many philosophical views about the values and norms that you can't really say, well, now they got. So at least with respect to that domain, do you think there is a final truth that philosophy by itself will get?
About value.
Let's say about, maybe this goes back to
Or
what you
aesthetics.
said to Emma about this domain of the world where philosophy kind of goes directly in. Or do we have to accept some kind of plurality of philosophical truths with respect to at least some elements of reality?
This is the question about whether there's one truth about, whether there is a truth about value questions and moral questions and aesthetic value. Is that right? Yeah, I guess I do think that. I'm quite persuaded by Plato's ontology of the forms, with the form of the good at the top. Quite persuaded by that, but that's just me. I mean, I can't tell you should believe that or whatever. I mean,
that even though there's many diversity of opinions, claims, theories, artistic practices, let's say, just take a very regular question, like, should we ban Gone with the Wind or not?
should we?
Ban, restrict, censor, Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Should we tear down the statues?
Yeah.
Well, that seems to be one aspect, but then there are also questions of, when we are playing a piece of Beethoven, should we follow,
Yeah.
the instruments that he only had at his disposition, or can I bring in the contemporary?
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be
Mm.
any truth that would determine that fact. It would the act, like it
Yeah.
would just be, well, personal tastes or.
Well, maybe those aren't moral questions, but I mean, it's one thing for. So you asked a few different. I think you mentioned a few different issues. Though. I mean, one you mentioned was that artists and writers don't really listen to philosophy of art, and so they may say they're not interested in it, but is it really true that they haven't absorbed, for example, the bare bones of Aristotle's theory of how tragedy works or something like that? I mean, I'm willing to bet that people consciously, unconsciously, follow that or integrate that or have heard of that in some other guise. I mean, philosophy seeps in. That's another thing. It's not up there. I mean, it may start up there, but it seeps deep down into the cracks. People don't even know they're using it, and that's part of the reason why they think they can get rid of us. Oh, we've got democracy, we've got all this stuff. We don't. What are you guys really doing, contributing now? Like, what have you ever done for us? They just don't even notice. It's under their feet. So I'd be surprised if they, even if they say they can ignore it, if they really do ignore it. As for the proliferation of theories, yeah. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, in a way, it's a problem of time. So you said the big first thing you said was, why can't we get rid of the scientists? One problem is time, right? We don't have the time. I don't have the time to do the neuroscience. I've got time pretty much to read the neuroscience that they've done, and think about it. I don't have time to do it myself. We need the division of labor. I also am not as good at doing experiments as they are. So there are also too many theories for us all to read and absorb. It's difficult, but I don't know, what can we do? We just have to do our best. I don't know. Do you have an idea how we can find the single moral aesthetic truth and then persuade everyone of it? I mean, that would be quite boring in a way if we stop discussing stuff. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is.
Right.
Oh no, that's not my project. That sounds like your project.
Hey,
You follow that just at the point when Locke is coming up with his theory of overflow as a way to incorporate the data about Stirling and the reports, that he's not doing philosophy, he's doing science.
Tell me why.
Because he's creating a theory using the scientific method.
Yeah.
So he's at the lower level.
Yeah, good. No, I think this is a good point. I wrote down on my phone, is the overflow doctrine ambiguous between a scientific theory and a philosophical theory? It might be. I don't know if this is the right answer, but there might be a more empirical claim there, which is something like, I don't know what it would be. Subjects do fully see all of the letters consciously, or something like that. And then a more philosophical claim, which perhaps is a broader integration into how consciousness works as such, or something like that. I'm not sure. Or perhaps the boundary point is not so clear cut as that. It might be that. I mean, Aristotle says in his Metaphysics 12, very famous passage, for all that, I talked about form and matter, he says, there really is only one thing there. There's really only a house. Now we can think about it in these two different ways, but it's one thing. That's hard to get your head around. If you get your head around matter-form distinction, for him to then go and say there's just one thing there, there's no real distinction, that's really hard. So maybe there's no real distinction between when Bloch's doing philosophy and he's doing science. Maybe it's more about just as a matter and form, you can take this conceptual stance on what's being done to the extent that it's a question of systematizing or fitting in with our broader worldview. It's philosophy. To the extent that it's about capturing observations and regularizing them, then it's science. Perhaps it's more a matter of degree than kind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does?
Can I just
follow
follow up to
Right.
this? Well, how did you actually reply to this when you were replying to Ease, when you said that philosophy is basically everywhere, that it just spills out and fills the small hole that are beneath us. So, in a sense, when you're building up a theory, a scientific theory, you're using a lot of stuff, and you're using a lot of already affirm theories that are, or we can say, made up with philosophical type of
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, you're
And
right.
in
You're
this
right.
sense, there is no clear-cut demarcation between science and philosophy. There is just one doing theory.
You're right. Because after all, sorry, we going to say more?
No.
After all, when I've got the materials that are going to be the house, like the fact that I've got those materials there is already because I'm building a house. It's like the form is there from the start. When I'm a neuroscientist and I'm doing neuroscience, I've already got some kind of philosophical theory in the background. I'm an internalist. I just don't know that I am because I never studied perception. And that's obviously guiding my work. So yeah, you can't, you already going to be, yeah, this must be the answer.
So sorry, what's the picture that science gives matter and that philosophy gives form?
Yes.
Or that philosophy is form
Well,
gives. Okay.
gives, yeah.
Both, both things. So possibly a banal question, but I remember the famous quote from Marx: "Philosophers have merely interpreted the world, but the point is to change the world."
Right.
He makes a comparison between the one within political action, but if we were to apply his words on the comparison between philosophy and science, would you be satisfied, in your view, of philosophy being the form with the role of philosophy merely under quotes giving an interpretation, while science changing the world? I mean, at least the practical part of science, or would you maybe say that interpretation in itself is a kind of a change?
Good question. Really good question. These are really good questions. Like I'm just really enjoying these questions. Yeah, because I keep saying things like, "Oh yeah, science is good practically, but theoretically." So now you say, "Well, practically matters." So you're saying philosophy's got no practical role, or what's its practical role? Well, I can make a bunch of gadgets. I can put satellites around the Earth. What's it for? It's for people to have good time. Why do they want to have a good time? Why do we want to spend time with our families? What even are you? Are you sentient? I don't know. I don't have direct access to your mind. Now we're into philosophy. What's it all for? So I don't think the practical can get rid of the philosophical. Philosophical is what drives the practical. This is where values and stuff come in. So yeah, that's to say that philosophy doesn't change the world is just to miss the point, I think, completely. And after, I mean, I don't know if you've read Popper, The Open Society and Its Enemies, but Popper blames Plato for Hegel and Marx and Nazism and the Second World War and communism and the Soviet Union. Well, that's a lot of power for a philosophical theory that's supposedly non-practical. But Plato gave this whole value system.
French Revolution as well. So
Yeah.
Luca.
I really enjoyed the talk. I really agree with you
Oh, great.
about everything, especially if we are addressing someone outside philosophy.
Yeah.
Especially what you are also experiencing in the UK is terrifying. So
Thanks.
I understand where you're coming from. Just a little bit, I would like to press an issue concerning how we can give the form. So it's more for the philosophers. There are no philosophers just to listen what I'm saying. But the point is this. I think already Mattia was pointing the issue. There are different ways in which we can give the form. Take the debate Rosenthal Locke about the conscious, unconscious things, or unconscious pain or unconscious perception. That debate clearly is conceptual. Probably, I would say, less scientific, but here I think I'm defending teacher. We can decide when the philosophical intervention is a scholastic splitting the hair, or is really relevant to the scientific practice. You take the same spelling experiment, you read how Fodor interpret the experiments to prove, not to prove, to shape an empirical, testable hypothesis. There are no conceptual representation. I don't know if you know that paper.
I don't.
Have a look, because it's fantastic how you start from the same empirical data. Fodor says we have a philosophical debate. Are there representations that are not conceptual? Now I do a series of conceptual moves to prove that we can test
Okay.
This like philosophical.
Via Sperling. Via Sperling. Via Sperling.
By Sperling.
Okay. What's the argument? Sorry, is it too?
Oh, it's quite long.
Okay, okay, no,
probably.
I'll have a
We
look.
can talk after if you like. It's there. But the point is that move is philosophical. He tries to make it testable. And you know better than me in philosophy or cognitive science, the availability of the notion of non-conceptual representation is very productive.
Yeah.
So I think Kitcher in that book is not saying that philosophy is useless. He's trying, as Philip was saying, there could be better ways to make it relevant
Yeah.
for science. That is not, I think, a Kitcher, if you see his production, it goes from very narrow, super specialistic philosophy of biology to aesthetics,
Yeah.
general plans, how they
Yeah.
interact
Yeah.
with science in democratic society. So maybe your reading wasn't too fair.
Well,
Teacher is really pushing this important point that there is this idea of relevance. Conceptual work is very important. Philosophy must do that, but at the same time, there should be a sense of the relevance of it. The scholasticism in certain analytic philosophy that you know better than me, the zombie, the Mary debates, is really crazy. I agree with Philip. Sometimes philosophers do crazy things that are completely useless. But that debate may generate, if there is a focus on the relevance and the people are informed about the theoretical, empirical dimension of the debate, can be really useful. Galilei as an example.
Yeah.
He was doing conceptual work, but was incredibly relevant to promote science. So I don't know, but this is more internal. Once we defend that philosophy is important, we can ask ourselves how we do it properly. But I think Teacher is more pushing the second line, the general, external attack on philosophy. Just that. Sorry for the long process.
No, great.
Just because really you activate a lot of
different
things.
That's good. Thank you very much. I don't think we agree actually. I think we're quite, which is nice.
Okay.
I didn't mean to make it sound like Kitcher was saying philosophy is useless. I know that's not what he's saying. I know he's saying, but he is saying, it seems to me, and I do confess I haven't read the book. I've only read like Vito kindly pointed me to Williamson's description of the book. And also, to be fair, I looked at the issue of European Journal of Philosophy of Science that was very sympathetic to the book. So I get my content from, I think I know, and anyway, what it's saying. He is saying though that philosophy needs to aim at relevance to science, or that's a norm, and I don't agree with that at all. I think that's getting things the wrong way around.
If you do that type of job, yes. So if you are in that type of job, but it's not excluding the other type ranges where philosophers do things that are not enough for science.
No, I just disagree flatly. I just think that's not the norm. That's not the way it should be. That's like saying, we should develop quantum physics with an eye on making snooker or billiards better. Or we should develop quantum physics in order to make better calculators. Like, no, we should do the theory. We'll get the calculators later if we get it right. We need to get it right. And we have a
design interpretation of Kitcher. You don't think that we need in any case an internal reflection on the good standards when we want to do philosophical intervention that is aimed at science. That was the point I was trying to.
Well, what you mentioned, like Mary and zombies and stuff.
Yeah.
What's your view about those? Because
impact of science zero. It's just sometimes something that confounds people. Sometimes you have excellent scientific work on perception, and then the scientists at the end they try to extrapolate zero. Bad philosophy, useless stuff. Non-conceptual content, very productive in terms of cognitive science. Computationalism as a philosophical idea, very productive inside the computational stuff. That's how it goes. Perception, yeah, it's true. We don't have the ultimate theory of quality. Okay, but you cannot say that opponent color vision mechanism is nothing. It's a different.
Oh no, it's great. But it doesn't tell me whether the colors are in there or not, which is kind of important.
Yeah, but at the same time,
sorry,
opponents is a philosophical idea. The statistical construction of color space via factor analysis is a fantastic, maybe philosophical because it's Galilei. Let's use mathematics to analyze phenomena. You get something of it there. You can know, for example, as an animal responding to colors without knowing what colors are. You can do a lot of things. You won't put people driving planes.
Practical.
Discriminate in certain ways. So you don't need to know anything about what to do.
But that's practical. Now, do you think So sorry, I still don't quite know what you think about Mary and zombies. Do you think they're a waste of time?
Yeah, I spent almost 15 years of my life on this.
Oh, I did my PhD, you know, I mean as well, not that, but yeah, but I don't think they're a waste of time. I think they're really important. So why do you think they're a waste of time?
The only thing I learned from that was trying to understand what Mary may possibly know scientifically. And then I have to study a lot of color vision to understand what color vision scientists do there nowadays. And that was very nice, and the work, all the rest was.
But why? Why?
Because you push a position, there is the counter argument, is not testable. Then you come with two-dimensional semantics, then you come with special introspective access directly to the qualitative. You know this. So I get out of that.
You're saying you're frustrated that you can't win.
No, win lose is not a biographical issue. It's just this idea we are wasting intellectual energies in something that doesn't seem to have any. I think probably you are pointing to that.
Yeah.
So-
But then
obviously
then it becomes a biographical move.
Oh no, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant you're frustrated by the stalemate. I just meant that.
But it becomes biographical. Say, I'm not sharp enough now to understand two-dimensional semantics. I cannot follow Chalmers and the model epistemology of semantics. This stuff, in any case, doesn't seem to be so soluble. Let's find something new to that.
I see.
That was my move.
Well,
But that's biography. But
yeah.
Again, Kitcher tries to make salient this possible aspect of philosophy. And that book is wonderful because it's addressed to young philosophers.
Yeah.
Also, that should really be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm going to read it. I should be told off for discussing it without reading it, I guess. I just thought the title was kind of paradoxical, but I don't know why you think Mary's use. I mean, I understand one can get frustrated with the debate, and also some of the moves in the debate are just silly. I think that as well. But like phenomenal concepts. I'm sorry, I don't like them. But it seems to me quite an important issue whether, so to speak, what our experience of red or red qualia is contained within, in some sense, the brain as it's described by neuroscience. That's that's a clear, substantive, important issue, it seems to me. For example, I've got panpsychist friends. Now, you probably don't think very much of panpsychism.
But that's the last twist.
but so for them, or for Russell, Bertrand Russell, who knew physics very well, what the Mary sort of thought experiment shows is that there's more to matter than physics describes, which is an interesting thesis as well.
Yeah.
Now, that's not an empirical thesis in a sense, or it's not empirically testable. It is an empirical thesis in the sense of being a thesis about the way the world is. It matters for how the world is. So there's those two senses. So I don't know why you think that's not a valuable issue to discuss. I mean, I can talk about the color opponency and so on, but that won't tell me the answer to that question. And knowing about the visual system.
But for example, there was this beautiful book by Andy Clark about the construction of color space, all the psychometrics of color vision. No philosopher discussed that. I found it so because it's not, of course, the solution of the big philosophical problem, but it was such a nice, relevant approximation.
Yeah.
Mike
But-
Watkins.
Andy Clark.
Mike Watkins, did he discuss any declines?
Yeah.
Did he? I think that he did.
No,
I don't remember
any discussion. But there, just to think the construction of a qualitative space via discriminatory data is such a philosophical interesting thing. It's relevant because it's connected in a past sense.
Absolutely.
In philosophy of mind, there was enough disciplinary place to be sensitive to that type of way of movement. Where people were more drawn in to think about what Mary learns or whether or not in a two-dimensional semantics, the a priori second intention of the zombie sculpture. That's my point. So I think picture that I really respect that book a lot is very important for me. Tries to push this point in my biography. I resonate.
Okay.
Just this.
I mean, I'm definitely not saying that we can and should ignore science. And I'm definitely not saying that.
There is much more philosophy at the periphery, intersection with science
Yeah.
than your account seems to tell us.
Well, I just don't think that it should be a norm for us to aim at the science, put it that way. We need it,
Yeah,
but we shouldn't be aiming at it. It should,
but there is a point of
Yeah,
intersection that
absolutely.
maybe you are-
well, but the matter form relationship captures that. Form needs matter.
General capture.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I don't want to make it sound.
Sorry,
No, this is good.
We're running out of time. There are two more people. Philip.
I'll skip it.
Steve,
No.
good. Jan.
I'll make it very short.
Yeah.
Actually, as to the form matter,
Yeah.
I'm very sympathetic to your ideas. And what seems to show is, and also you replies to other questions, like philosophy is inescapable. Philosophy is everywhere, also in science, also in neuroscientists, and as theory and principles in journalism, in art, in people making AI, they have a certain idea of what intelligence is. So that seems to be the idea that science is not neutral. So this is very popular idea, science is neutral, science is objective. And so just it was a small remark. I didn't know then whether the metaphor form and matter works well to prove your point, because that seems to presuppose a kind of idea that the matter is a kind of neutral thing and then the form. I didn't know, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
Because it is a good metaphor, and I like that you frame your talk with
It's not a metaphor. It's real. Yeah, anyway.
The metaphors are real.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, did you want to say more?
No.
Yeah. Good. And yeah, and I maybe get too carried away with the distinction, and I forget metaphysics 12, which says, no, you've really only got one thing there. And we need to try somehow to understand that, which I can't, but I try and bear it in mind. And I think that's the antidote to what you're saying. Then the matter is not neutral, unless you believe there's prime matter. Going further with Aristotle, and I don't know if people don't think that makes sense. So flesh has got a form, bricks have got a form, so there's form already in that matter. Yeah. So
yeah, that approach makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really good. Really good questions. It's recorded, right? So I can listen back to this. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.